Hurricane Milton is fast closing in on Florida's west coast, creating a situation the US president calls a matter of life and death. There are warnings of widespread destruction and a life-threatening storm surge just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene pummeled the southeast of the US. Milton's been downgraded to a Category 3 system, but it has grown in size and is producing winds of more than 200 kilometres an hour. At least 5 tornadoes have been triggered in South Florida ahead of the hurricane's landfall. Dubbed the storm of the century, meteorologists say it could be an unprecedented event.
It's sickening as a meteorologist, as a hurricane specialist, to be looking at history in the making, just at the storm itself. It doesn't have to impact any area. To see that it gets so strong with its barometric pressure as well as its wind field, but to also see it approaching Florida. We've been seeing so many hurricanes the past few years here. It's just very disheartening to see that we have to go through another event like this again, and such a powerful storm.
Evacuation orders are in effect for millions of residents across nearly 500 kilometres of Florida's coastline. People leaving their homes say they've never experienced a storm like this.
I've been here for 38 years and never had one that forced us to do this.
Everybody's worried about the same thing, you know. Do you have a home to come back to?
Because they say it was going to be worse than what it was, and we ever about what happened with the last hurricane, how many people stayed in and died. We decided to take the warning and come in.
Mandatory evacuation for zones A, B, and C.
Many residents have defied urgent orders from the authorities to leave. They've decided to hunker down and wait it out.
I don't recommend this to anybody, not a soul, but we're going to be fine.
These storms are nothing to mess with. Although I'm a Floridian, I'm used to it. It was in the best interest for my wife and children to leave, and for me to remain to ensure the house is okay, ensure our business is okay, and protect our property.
Well, with more, I'm joined by North America correspondent Carrington Clark, who's in Washington. Hi, Carrington. We just heard from the president. What is the latest situation there?
Yes, this monster storm is still tracking on a path towards the densely populated area around Tampa in Florida. And although it has been downgraded, it is expected to be a devastating impact when we actually see it properly hit landfall. It's still a few hours until the eye of the storm actually does hit landfall, but the impacts are already being felt. Not only have we seen multiple tornadoes hit, there's been 50 tornado warnings actually around Florida, but also these catastrophic winds are starting to buffet the west coast, and this torrential heavy rain is starting to set in. But those tornadoes alone have already managed to upturn vehicles. They've also destroyed homes, and a lot of them are outside what they expected the path of this tornado to be. I mean, it's hard to really imagine just how widespread the impact of this storm will be. It's some 51 of 67 counties in Florida are currently in a state of emergency. Millions of people live in areas that have been declared evacuation zones. But we also did hear just a little while ago from the United States President Joe Biden, who said all people should now listen to their local authorities, and for some people it is now simply too late to actually try to evacuate.
At this point, evacuation is probably difficult. So I encourage people to look for safer shelter. Sometimes moving just a few miles can mean the difference between life and death. We've already approved emergency declarations for Florida. We have thousands of federal personnel on the ground. We've staged and are ready to go. We have 20 million meals, 40 million liters of water.
President Biden speaking a short time ago. Carrington, I mentioned this has come soon after the last devastating hurricane. What impact has that had on preparations for this one?
Yeah, Hurricane Helene was also seen as a monster storm. It was particularly damaging because of how much of the American mainland it actually crossed over, including all the way up into, say, North Carolina, where it caused devastating storms. This has a different trajectory. It's crossing across the middle at this moment of the Florida peninsula, and then we'll head out into the Atlantic Ocean. But that means that people on the Gulf Coast, which will be first hit. At this point, it seems to be by a Category 3 storm. But then even people on the Atlantic coast will be impacted by this particular storm. And Florida was impacted by Hurricane Helene. There is still a huge amount of debris on the streets from that particular hurricane. And now the major concern, or one of the major concerns, is that that debris will now become dangerous projectiles when it's whipped up by these catastrophic winds. I have never heard the type of language that we're currently hearing from authorities here in the United States. They have been particularly blunt about the risk of this particular storm. Yes, they have an incentive to want to talk up the potential danger of these storms because they wanted people to evacuate when there was still time, and they now want them to be paying attention to the advice. But it does appear that they are genuinely very concerned about just how devastating this storm is going to be. A particular concern is this storm surge, which is basically picking up how high the sea is, and that you'll see this inundation of up to 4.5 meters perhaps in some of these populated areas. It does appear that the storm has wobbled, as they say, and is now heading slightly further north again, which means that it's again almost on a direct hit with the Tampa region. So this is very concerning, a very built up populated area. You would hope almost all people did heed those early evacuation warnings, but we really won't know until this storm has passed through just how damaging it has been.